Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. Thanks for saying good morning back. I know. We're back, obviously, from the break. We're following the news very closely. We understand the president is going to speak to the nation at 11 o'clock this morning about the circumstances with respect to Iran. We are absolutely unified as a conference, unified behind the president, unified with respect to the importance, the significance, and the righteousness of the act the president took to eliminate Qasem Soleimani from the battlefield. And think it's very important that following a course of time during the Obama administration when the policy toward the Iranians was nothing short of appeasement, President Trump has turned that around. President Trump has made clear that the United States will not tolerate the kind of Iranian malign activity that we've seen in the past, and certainly will not tolerate the kinds of attacks that Qasem Soleimani was instrumental in for so many years that resulted in the death of American service members. We also think it's very important for people to recognize at this moment the impetus on the part of some of our Democratic colleagues to blame the United States of America is unacceptable. We reject that. As Americans, we ought to be united. And in particular, the speaker's assertion that somehow the activity that's going on in Iran is a result of action that the administration took requires a willingness to completely disregard the history of the last 40 years and the attacks that have been launched against the United States and our interests ever since the Iranian Revolution. So we look forward to the United States being unified behind the president. We look forward to the president's remarks, and we will continue certainly here as Republicans in the House to be unified as a body as well. We are joined this morning by two of our members who have direct personal experience, and I'd like to turn things over first to Dr. Brad Wenstrup to talk about the impact of Iranian activities throughout the region. Dr. Wenstrup.
Thank you. Let's make no mistake about this and what occurred in the last few days. This was a defensive strike against a terrorist that worked against Americans, that has American blood on his hands. When I served in Iraq, I had the unfortunate experience to zip body bags of Americans that have been killed, many at the hands of someone like Soleimani. We amputated limbs. We saw traumatic brain injury. I think General Milley said it very well when he said that we would be culpably negligent if we did not act when we had the opportunity. You know, today we have some that seemingly are more aligned with Iranian General Soleimani than with American General Milley. And that's a shame. But you know, this administration, this president, this Secretary of State, this Secretary of Defense, this Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff have said there'll be no more Benghazis, there'll be no more hostage taking of our diplomats in our embassies, and there'll be no more taking of American lives. And if there is, we will react. Just recently, we had one of our UAVs taken down by Iranians. We have had the attack in Kirkuk, where an American was killed, and we've had the attack on our embassy. Today, thrown on the ash heap of history, is General Soleimani, a terrorist, along with al-Baghdadi, along with Osama bin Laden. And to those Americans killed and maimed, and to your families, you're not forgotten, because some justice has been served. And to those who play politics with this defensive action of Americans and American interests, and to those who say that this is an overreaction, it's an insult to the American lives lost. It's an insult to those that have been maimed and permanently damaged, and it trivializes the American lives that have been spared by this action to take out a terrorist that was ready and willing and prepared to act to kill more Americans. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Wenstrup. And now I'd like to turn things over to our colleague gentleman from Texas, Mr. Crenshaw.
Thank you. I deployed to Iraq twice, deployed to Afghanistan once, and after getting blown up, I deployed back to the Middle East in Bahrain. I have seen the Iranian threat network, studied it closely. I've seen what their export of weapons does to our soldiers in Iraq. Over 600 killed by IEDs, specialized IEDs that were exported there from the Iranians. The Iranians are experts at surrogate warfare. They create sleeper cells in Bahrain, right next to our Navy base. They stoke civil war in Yemen, in Iraq, and in Syria. They're experts at creating chaos. Now, the Democrats' arguments rely on two false premises. One is that history began with Donald Trump's strike against Soleimani. That is, of course, not true. History began long before that. The Iranians have been escalating against the United States for a very long time, started in 1979. More recently, they embarrassed our U.S. Navy sailors after they boarded a U.S. Navy vessel. They've shot down U.S. drones. They've put limpet mines on oil tankers. They've attacked Saudi oil facilities. They've put rocket attacks towards our bases. And they orchestrated an attack against a U.S. embassy. History began long before Donald Trump finally took action and stopped letting the Iranians punch us in the face. The second false premise is that there is this false choice between doing nothing and all-out war. The president is not taking us to all-out war. There is a lot in between, and we have to be more honest about that fact. We have to set a red line and say that as the United States of America, we will not be punished indefinitely. We have to take action, and we had to respond, and the president did just that. And it's time to be unified behind our president instead of casting partisan stones. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank Dan Crenshaw and Brad Wenstrup for their service to our country, the things they did to help defend our freedoms, and to all of the men and women who are defending our freedoms today, and especially for those who died or were severely injured because of brutal terrorists like Soleimani. I want to thank them for their service. And I want to commend President Trump for standing up to those terrorists like Soleimani and saying no longer is America going to stand by and let brutal terrorists kill Americans. Not only killing Americans in the past, but plotting to kill more Americans. Everybody knows his history. It was under the Obama administration where they deemed him a terrorist. This isn't anything new. The fact that he was finally taken out is something that you've seen bipartisan support for, not just Republicans. Go look at the comments of President Obama's Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson or Susan Rice or so many others who recognized what Soleimani represented and that this action was long overdue. And just like when we were in the majority, when President Obama took out Osama bin Laden, we supported that action. It was the right thing to do when President Obama gave that command. Just by the same token, it was the right thing to do when President Trump gave the command to take out Soleimani. We are a safer world because a brutal terrorist is gone from this planet. A terrorist who had killed hundreds of Americans and was planning to kill even more. And so it shouldn't become partisan. It's very disappointing to see some in the Democrat leadership here in the House trying to criticize those actions that kept America safer, using some of the same talking points that are coming out of Tehran. And now talking about changing the War Powers Act to further limit the ability for any president of the United States to defend this country. I would suggest Speaker Pelosi go back and look at the legislation that then Senator Joe Biden filed in 1995 to ensure that a president would have the full ability to protect America, especially against terrorists, people like Soleimani. Now, maybe he's changing his tune because he's a candidate for president now, but he should go read the legislation he filed back in the 1990s when he was a United States Senator. And so hopefully during a time like this, we can all come together, not as Republicans and Democrats, but as Americans who recognize that a brutal terrorist who killed hundreds of Americans and was planning to kill even more is gone from this planet because of the action the bold action of President Trump. It's time to be united in that. And then, of course, if you look at the other things that are going on around the world, it's unfortunate that as we start this new year, Speaker Pelosi is not using this majority to tackle the tough issues that are facing hardworking families, like working with Republicans to lower drug prices, to secure our border, to make sure our troops have all the tools they need to do their job safely in defending our freedoms. But instead, you still hear them talking about impeachment. It's still all about a personal dislike of a president who was duly elected in 2016. And they're spending all of their time, even now in this new year, talking about trying to reverse the results of the 2016 election or trying to stop him from winning in 2020, instead of working with all of us to tackle these serious issues that face our country. We'll continue focusing on those issues, and hopefully we can start getting some action and moving on the things that matter to the hardworking families of this great country. And with that, turn it over to our Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy.
Thank you, Steve. I want to start by thanking Congressman Winstrup and Congressman Crenshaw, not just for their words, but for their service, for hearing the call and serving and defending our nation. The resolve of our nation and the resilience of our men and women in uniform and the commitment to stand up for what is right continues to make America the greatest country on earth. Last night was no different. Our troops in Iraq stood their ground, bracing for the unknown. This morning, we wake to the welcome news that there was no U.S. casualties. The President will address the nation shortly this morning, but over the last week, we continue to see under this administration the strength of our foreign policy has made us safer, stronger, and more respected around the world. It's very clear that the President had to take action. For more than 40 years of what Iran has been doing to America, but more importantly, just in the short time frame, from shooting down a drone, from attacking tankers, from killing a U.S. citizen, to attacking our embassy. The President made it very clear, if you would kill an American, we will respond directly, and we did. We are safer for it. I think all of Congress should speak with one voice in moments like this, to send a very clear message around the world that we defend Americans, here and abroad. I hope the actions taken by the majority this week, that they rethink what they want to move on this floor, and that we stand together in a time of need right now. Now let me open it up for questions, comments. Yes, sir.
What more do you want to hear from the President himself in the next hour, or from members of his administration when they brief Congress about the strategy for what comes next? And what, in your view, is the role of Congress in overseeing or authorizing potential further military action in Iraq, or maybe even in Iran?
Well, if it's in Iraq, the President already has all authority to act. The President didn't need an AUMF to act on this. This was more of an Article 2. He was very clear in his actions where he went. I think all of America has to understand, too, there was a moment in time when the U.S. drone was shot down. Many of us thought action should be taken at that moment. I thought the President was correct when he pulled back. He wanted to give pause. He wanted to de-escalate the situation. It was Iran who chose to do different. What did they do since? They killed a U.S. citizen, and they attacked our embassy. The President has all authority to defend us, and he used that right to do it. Today, we'll have a full briefing. We had a Gang of 8 meeting yesterday. I hope all members go, put their politics aside, and walk into that room as an American and listen to the information. I think we should put aside impeachment and have an intel committee that works on intel instead of try to change it to impeachment, especially what has been happening for the last 6 months. This hasn't just taken place within the last week. Iran has been trying to push us for quite some time in a more aggressive manner than they have for quite a while. Yes.
Democrats will differentiate the taking out of bin Laden or even al-Awlaki to this particular situation with Soleimani, saying that Soleimani was, even though he was a terrorist, but he was also a state head over in Iran. What are your thoughts on that as far as the essentially differentiating between these circumstances as far as
More than 600 servicemen were murdered by Soleimani. I don't think there's any difference of opinion. I think the Democrats are wrong if they would even try to raise that issue. And I hope when they go into the briefing, for those who may be new, listen and be educated. I hope they listen to what was planned in the future. I hope they paid attention what happened in the last month. Maybe they were too focused on impeachment to see what was happening, what Iran was doing to America throughout the world. Maybe they should pay more attention to what happened when the billions of dollars from the last administration was sent to them and where the money was spent. Was some of that money spent and used in military weapons to come directly back at our men and women in uniform? I hope they ask that question first. Yes.
Iran has essentially offered an off-ramp. Do you think the president should take it, or are you calling for some sort of retaliation here?
I will allow the president to speak to the nation. I'll allow him to gather all the information, and I think the president has handled this correctly all the way through. I trust his judgment, and I know he's making us safer by the actions he is taking. Thank you.
Testify publicly in front of Congress about Iran?
I believe Pompeo is not going to, he's going to be there today, is he not? He'll be in front of Congress today to ask any questions and answer any questions any member of Congress has. I think at this moment in time, the most important thing to do, let's deal with the situation at hand. I think that's more important instead of taking Pompeo away from his job.
Mr. Leader, it's been 3 weeks since the impeachment articles. What do you make of the delay?
I make of the delay by the speaker is just another example of how weak her case is. The idea that she had to rush us, that she had to get it because it was so imperative that it move forward, the idea that she wouldn't move it forward just shows the weakness of the case, and more importantly, the no need for it. I think our focus should be other places, and we've been giving that example. Unfortunately, as she told us when she was first sworn into office, they would govern differently. She told us she had to hurry through impeachment because this year was going to be different. It continues to show the only agenda they have is impeachment, and America needs something different.